In this module, we've shown you strategies to transform a sales letter into a postcard, trimming it down to just the essentials that you need to get your message across. We've also shown you some voodoo techniques to use variable data to create your postcards with pearls and other personalized elements, even swapping out colors and images automatically based on the data in your list. In this video, we're going to demonstrate a technique that'll help you to produce postcards and envelopes more quickly by having them automated but still look handwritten. When Avi and I first started doing our direct mail testing, we noticed that handwritten envelopes got a much better response than if they had been, just printed by a laser printer, in regular font. That takes time, though, that hand addressing. It's worth it, but it does take time. We wanted to see if we could possibly speed things up by using a more realistic looking hand written font. So instead of actually sitting down and writing and addressing the envelopes or putting notes, doodles, and stuff like that on the postcards. Well, Avi and I both noticed that, a regular handwritten font still looks pretty produced. It looks fake, okay? Other people noticed that too because we did try using that, and although the response was better than if it was just a regular font, it still wasn't as good as if it had really been handwritten. So we sat down and thought about what makes handwriting look authentic, and we concluded that individual letters within a block of text should have some variation. Okay, so like all the S's shouldn't look exactly the same. There should be some type of variation if possible. Okay, and the lines of text shouldn't be perfectly straight. They shouldn't all be exactly the same size. The letters shouldn't all be the same size. There should be some human element there. So here's a technique that we developed that gets pretty darn good results. And you can use this technique for postcards as well as envelopes and even in your sales letter. If you want to put, like a handwritten look PS at the bottom of your sales letter, stuff like that. So we're going to do a plain white envelope. Remember though, this is essentially the same thing as if we were doing the back of this postcard. Okay, but I just want you to see that you can use the same technique to just create a simple envelope, and it's real easy. So let's go to File and New. And for a number 10 envelope, we're just going to switch this to inches. For a number 10 envelope, we're looking at 9.5 inches wide by 4 1/8, so 4.125. We're going to make sure that we've got a white background. Click OK. And there is our envelope layout, okay? Again, 4 1/8 inches tall, 9.5 inches wide. Now for this example, I want to show you something. In Excel, when you're working with your data, let's pull up our file that we were just working on. Remember that we have to have a corresponding layer for every header that is in our list. Well, from a managerial standpoint here, you might find yourself making copies of your list just so that it's real easy to keep it trimmed down. Remember, all those headers in your list have to have that layer in Photoshop. So in this case, I'm going to make another copy of this list, and I'm going to only work off of that copy and delete any extraneous headers that I don't need, columns that I don't need. So right-click here, move or copy. We're going to select Create a Copy. That gets produced, and I'm going to right-click and rename this to Envelopes. Now, I have to determine what fields I don't need. I know right away I don't need any of this information. I don't need bullet points. I don't need the headline. All I need, basically, is their address. Okay, so let's right-click and delete all of that. I need a zip code, I need a state, I need a city, I need the address. I don't need gender. I don't need last name or first name because I have full name. So if I select all of that, hit delete, that leaves me with full name, address, city, state, and the 5-digit version of the zip. Now, of course, just like with the postcard, I can add extra fields here if I want to do some personalization. I can do a special note that shows up on the envelope that's for males or females, or for older people or younger people, or wealthy people or low income people. Whatever, whatever criteria you're found that you're working with, you can create additional layers here and put those in your Photoshop design, okay? But for our purposes, we're just doing a standard envelope, nothing fancy. So I'm going to take this file and I'm going to click File, Save As. We're going to put it in the same place and we're going to call it Envelope Batch 2. Again, make sure that it's comma separated values or TXT if you're using the tab delimited versions. Hit Save. Same message as before. Hey, this is multiple sheets, blah, blah, blah. You can't do that with a CSV file. Okay, so that gets saved and that's done. Let's go ahead and take this off screen a little ways first. I'm going to actually put it on the side because I need to see it. You guys don't necessarily need to right now. I've actually got 4 monitors set up here, so I just have to move it on to a different one. We're going to go ahead and make the address layout now in Photoshop. And again, guys, this isn't a Photoshop tutorial, okay? I have to assume that you do know a little bit about Photoshop. So I'm going to go through this assuming that knowledge, that you have a basic understanding of Photoshop. Also, if you're doing postcards, remember, it's the exact same process. On the back of the postcard, you're going to have to put, you're going to use this exact same technique for the lettering. I'm going to create a new text layer. This is where the name is going to appear. I already know the name of the field, right? So I'll just go ahead and type that. Then I'm going to do the address. Now, we've really gotten good results with Google's Caveat font. Not that we don't have to do some more tweaking to it, we do, but as a starting place, it's a pretty decent looking handwritten font, and it's a free download. So just go to Google Fonts, look for Caveat. One thing that you guys got to watch for is justification, whether the text is left justified or right justified. Mostly what that comes into play here is the city and state. We want the city and state to look good together, but the city name, the length of it can vary. And Photoshop, it's doing graphics. It doesn't know that you want to move state over if the city is longer. Okay, I'm going to show you what I mean, and then I'm going to show you how we fix that problem. All right. First, let's go ahead and add a comma. We're just going to put that comma right here before the state. Also, in this case, state needs to be the name of the field of the layer, but the state is only going to be 2 characters. So I can actually change the text to show 2 characters, then go over here in the layer, double click that, and change the layer name. So the layer name is now state, even though what is showing there is just ST. What that lets me do is now I can take my zip code and I can move it a little bit closer to the state, make it look formatted a little bit nicer. So let's go ahead and do these variables now. Set these up so that you can see, that we've made the connection. Go to Images, Variables, and we're going to define our variables. The first one that shows up is that zip code. Click Text Replacement. Again, take the variable name, just make it exactly the same as the header and the layer. Go to the next one. State. Replacement. State. City. Text replacement. Address. and full name. And we just do that for each one of those layers. Once it's done, we can switch from defining our variables to the actual data sets. And now we want to import our file. So select File. We're going to switch to CSV. And this is envelope batch 2 is the one that we're working with. Load it. Uh-oh. See that error right there? That's what happens when you have the file open when you try to import it. So let's make sure we close that. And now we will try that import again. Batch 2. Okay, no error. Make sure that use first column for data set names is checked. We're going to replace any existing data sets. Click OK. And now you can see the data gets swapped out. Now notice the city and state totally all screwed up. Okay, because that has to do with the justification. This is planning kind of stuff that you have to do. I'm going to click OK. That leaves all of that there. The way that you fix a problem like this is select that text layer. Go up here and right justify that layer, the text. Then click the Move tool and move it over to the right. Now it's going to look the same, but it's not the same because now that text is right justified, meaning it's going to start on the right and any extra length to the file is going to go to the left. Okay, and let's take a look and see what it looks like now. You can go directly to your data sets, by the way. When you click variables, you can go straight to the data set, and then you see what you get here. Now, what I like to do is once you have this layout, you want to see the actual names in there and work with those names. If you want to, you can click Apply, and Photoshop is going to change those layer names and leave the information on the screen like it is. That is helpful for layout type stuff, okay? So I'll click Apply and hit OK. Now, my layer names have been changed, but they're already linked to the appropriate data, so everything's fine, okay? What I'm going to do is take the city, state, and zip, highlight all three of them, and then with the Move tool, I'm going to bump them over a little bit. Now, the cool thing about this is we don't have to, you don't have to be perfect. You actually want it to look a little bit different. So the fact that, my placement here, oh, I forgot my comma. Let's get that moved over. You don't want it to line up exactly perfect. So I will actually intentionally stagger some of this stuff so that, it does not look like it's all exactly straight line kind of, computer generated stuff. You want it to look less perfect. Okay. So as good as this looks, and again, the caveat font from Google actually, it does a pretty good job. It uses contextual replacements. So if you were to happen to have, let's see if there is like the letter E, for example, not exactly identical every time it is used. In Photoshop, that's an option here. If I go to Catherine, if I go to the name layer, pull this up, this little squiggly right here, this is contextual replacements. Look at Catherine Hegan. Okay, watch while I'm clicking this. I turn it off. Now all of the E's are exactly the same. I turn it on and they change. The H changes. Okay, so some of the letters have a difference. This is the I's are different than other I's. Okay, so that's one little variation that helps. But we're going to take it a step further. On the name layer, I'm going to hit Control T. That's the transform tool. Then up here, I'm going to hit this little icon for warp. Now, over on the left, I select which kind of warp that I want. Click the drop down. Right now it's set to none. And I'm going to change to one of these other types, for example, arc. Now, another one that works pretty good is flag. Flag's going to make it a little bit wavy like that, right? But all of them are going to be way too exaggerated for what we want. We want these to be very subtle imperfections. And to do that, we use the bend, the H horizontal, and the V vertical values. We tweak these. So this bend is set to 50 right now. I can click and drag and pull it to the left and lower it. And you can see that as I do that, this is flattening out. Okay, so I'll do it a little bit more. Again, we just want it to be a little bit, barely detectable to the eye, that it's not completely straight. Very subtle differences. Now we're going to change the H value. And you'll notice if I change that and drag it to the right, I'm just going to exaggerate. See what it does? It starts out small and gets bigger. If I drag it to the left, it'll start out bigger and get smaller. Again, small variations, barely detectable. Let's do something like a 10 there. And for V, this is kind of adjusting the slant. And it's very important that once you get these set and you're happy with the results, I'm going to just make these all exact numbers so I can remember them easier. It's very important that once you do that, you remember what those starting places, okay? 12, 10, and 2, and it's flag. The reason for that is that when you set these values, that's kind of like someone's unique handwriting style. So you want to try to use similar values on the other text so that it looks like the same person wrote it, right? Once you're done with it, click this little check mark, and that is applied to that text. Then all you have to do is go in and do the same for any of the other text. So let's do the others. Select the address, Control T, hit warp, click the drop down, do what did we do? Flag. And then I think this was something like 10. And I already forgot the other one, so I'm just going to do 5 and 3 and see what that looks like. So let's just say it's 10, 5, and 3. Hit the check mark. Then I'll do the city. Control T. Ten, 5, and 3. And hit the check mark. Okay. I'm not going to worry about the state because that's just 2 letters. I am going to do the zip code though. Control T. Warp it, and 10, 5, and 3. And another thing, let's take the name. We can do Control T again, and this time, maybe just give it a little bit of a slant and kind of reposition it. Not a lot. You don't want to exaggerate it, right? But you want it to look imperfect, just like it would if a real person was doing it. Let's move this comma up here so that I can keep selecting it all together. And now here's the really cool part. Because of the warp being applied to those text elements, when we run the data set, it simply swaps out the text, but the warp is still applied. Let's check it out. Image, variable, data sets. And as I scroll through here, you're going to see the data gets changed out. And there's a lot of addresses in Kings Mills, so I don't know when it's going to switch here, but it will eventually switch. You can see also the city is lined up a lot better, right? It's not going over top of the state. But that warp is applied, and it looks like imperfect human handwriting. Now, let me show you another cool little trick for changing the color of your ink. We can put all of these elements in a group. So I've selected all of them. I'm going to click here and put them in a group. We'll just call this address. And then I'm going to apply an effect to this called color overlay. And that's going to change the color for any pixels on that layer. So color overlay. And I can click my box here, pick a color, any color. Recommend blue, black, or red, by the way. Because you want to be realistic with this, right? You want it to look like this is somebody that wrote this letter. So blue or black ink, unless you're wanting to, really gather attention. Sometimes we use blue or black ink for the addressing, and we use red for maybe some doodles. So I might actually, let's go ahead and do another bit of text here. Put don't lose this. And watch this. Control T, warp. Do the same type of thing to it. Apply that. I can even, tweak it. But I'm now going to move that layer into the group that has the ink color, right? The color overlay, so that it's the same. And now I want to put a doodle on that. So let's go outside of the address to create a new layer. And this is a brush tool. It's a special brush stroke that is designed to look like underlines or circles. And we'll just stamp it right there. Okay, and Control T and reshape that so that it fits a little bit better. Of course, you can have a return address up here. It can be whatever you want. It can be a logo. It can be just regular printed type mailing address text. It doesn't matter. What we found is the recipient address, this area right here, that needs to be handwritten. That needs to look great. The return address really doesn't matter. So this can be your business logo, or this can be a business name. It can be your personal name, however you're doing your marketing, okay? For example, I can switch to a regular font. And I will fix all of that because I know a bunch of stuff's happening that you can't see. And let's change. Apparently a bunch of stuff's happening that I can't see either. I don't even know the zip code for over there, so I'll just make that up. All right, so that's perfectly fine and acceptable if you have it like that. Might, though, let's change it to black. That way it will have a little bit of a distinction there, okay? And that would mean, okay, we're all set. We're ready to go. How in the hell do I print this? Because here's the thing. This is definitely a little caveat. There's no way inside of Photoshop to open up this envelope file, even though you've got the list attached to it. There's no way to say, okay, now print out 100 of these envelopes, okay? Doesn't work that way. If you're using InDesign, you can do that. You can open up your document, you can do your fields in there, and you can print directly there. Photoshop, though, it's a graphical program, okay? So first, we've got to save each one of those records as individual Photoshop files. We'll then take those Photoshop files and we will save them as JPEGs, and then we can batch print those JPEGs. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Go up to File, go to Export, and then go to Data Sets as Files. Select a folder that you want to export to, but then the important part, this is very important. For file naming, this has to do with you having to match up letters to envelopes, or if you're printing two sides of a postcard and you've got personalization on both sides, you're going to have to match those up. You want that to all print in the same order. Okay, so for the file naming, you want these to be sorted so that they appear in the exact same order that they appeared in the list. Remember, your list gets sorted by zip code, right? Plus, if you're doing envelopes and letters, you have to match them up. So call this in the first field right here, I'm going to just say envelope. You could do postcard if that's what you're working on, okay? Then you have an underscore. And these go left to right and then down, left to right, left to right. So this is a naming convention that's being used for the files that are being created. And you can see there's an example right here. Okay, so the first thing is envelope and then an underscore. So envelope, underscore, and then you want data set number, because that is the order in which it is appearing in the list. So Catherine Hegan is number 1 in the list. That number is going to increment automatically. Then you want another underscore, and then you see where it says data set name. That's the name of the file. Okay, that's the name of the record, the person. That means that every one of these that gets produced is now going to be called envelope 2, and then the person's name, envelope 3, the person's name, etc. Very important that you keep it sorted like that. I'm going to click OK, and it goes through there, and notice all the names getting updated. Okay, it is creating files for every single one of those. Let's go in the envelopes folder, and you can see now that I have a PSD file, a Photoshop file, for every single record that was in that list. Obviously, if you're going to do 1,000 records at a time, you want to make sure you got a lot of storage space, because each one of these files, just depends on how big your project is. If it's postcards, could be pretty big. But you're going to have a PSD file for every address now. And notice how they're sorted. Number 1's first, and the last one is last. That's because of that data set numbering. The next step is to take all of these files and batch process them in Photoshop to turn them into JPEGs so that we can print them very easily. So we're going to go to File and Scripts. And don't worry, guys, we've got a blueprint for this that you can download, and it's going to show you all of the steps. Just do it a few times and you will get it. We're going to go to Image Processor. We're going to select the folder that contains those PSDs, okay? In this case, it's the envelope folder. We're going to save it in the same location. We're going to save it as a JPEG. And quality, set that to 10. Then all you have to do is hit Run. Notice what it's doing now. It's saving a copy. It's opening each file and saving a copy as a JPEG. Obviously, if you have 1,000 records, this can take a little bit of time. So once that is done, though, we'll go over here. Let's wait for it a sec. Almost there. All right, once that's done, go back to the folder. Now we've got a JPEG folder, and we have JPEG copies of all of those files. So when you want to print, guess what all you have to do? Highlight all of the files, right-click, print. You can specify your paper size if you're doing envelopes, blah, blah, blah. Now, if you print all your envelopes and sales letters and they're pre-sorted like this, I'll just cancel out of that. If they're pre-sorted like this, they're going to line up, okay? So you won't have any trouble matching up the right letter with the right envelope. What I suggest is you do a small batch first. Maybe just do like 10. That way everything has been sorted correctly. And then once you're comfortable with it, send a larger job. When you're all done, don't forget, go in here and, once you've got everything printed, you can highlight everything and delete it. Because again, if you're dealing with, hundreds or even thousands of files, that can be a lot of storage space. So find the blueprint for this bonus module. We've got a step-by-step guide for this process of producing, postcards or envelopes and getting them printed yourself. Do it a few times. You'll find that it isn't all that tough. And if you're pretty good with Photoshop, you can actually turn a lot of this into an action, and you'll be able to automate it even further. For printing postcards, it would be the exact same process. you just want to make sure, let's go up here to File, Export, Data Sets as Files. You want to make sure you've got that data set number in there. So I would change this to postcard underscore data set number underscore and then the data set name, and it'll do the same thing. With that, though, I'll give you a little bit of a word of advice. You are going to have to print, if you're doing a postcard and there's personalization on both sides, you're going to print the front of the postcard first, and then you make sure that you keep them in the same order that they come off of the printer. And then you'll take that stack and you'll reload the printer with just that stack, not blank postcards. You load it with that stack that's pre-printed, and then you process the backside of the postcards. Make sure that your orientation is correct, and when you print that out, it's going to pull those already front side printed postcards in, and it's going to print the backside of them. Don't worry though, the first time you attempt to do this, it's going to be a little tricky probably, but take my word for it. Nothing worthwhile is easy. Do it a couple of times and you'll get it. If you have access to Adobe InDesign, it can help simplify some of these steps because you don't actually have to export the images. You can just open the document, set your variables, and you can print directly from there. But like I said, not as many people familiar with InDesign. And most people use Photoshop. Thanks for watching. As always, if you have any questions, let us know. We'll be glad to help out.